So it's that same time of week again where I have to make a video, and I decided to come outside and make it. It's that week between Christmas and New Year's, and I think it should have a name because everything leading up to Christmas is all about Christmas, and then everybody kind of just it's like I dip into the sea of like forgetfulness somehow, and then by New Year's all of a sudden I'm excited again. So last week I was talking about events 1 and 2 of my like life spiritual journey, and I'm consumed in these events. Like I'm totally absorbed in them. So event 1 was the kids on the playground, and they made me realize that I couldn't hide my weaknesses, and it felt like I'm exposed, and that this might be a part of life. And then event 2 was the girl who made me realize that I was totally perceiving the world wrong, and somehow I felt like now it was that much more important because it would affect whether women liked me or not. This whatever was wrong with me, so I took it was extremely serious. And then so I stopped participating in society. I really wanted to solve this issue. That lasted all throughout the end of high school, and I sort of kind of graduated from high school. I'm pretty sure I didn't fulfill the requirements, but I don't think they really cared. But after that, I didn't go to like a college. In my hometown, most of the people went to college. It was a college town, so that was like the expectation. And I had sort of just like stalled out. My car, whatever car I'd been driving, metaphorically, was, broken down and left on the side of the road. But I went to community college. Anyway, I discovered Joseph Campbell when I was 19 years old. The Power of Myth. It was a PBS series with Bill Moyers. Anyway, Joseph Campbell, he introduced this idea that the individual could have like an important role to play in society, and that you didn't have to achieve things on society's terms in order for your life to matter in a certain way. Kind of like an artist, they go to some place other people can't see, and then they bring forth like a creation, and that actually affects society. But where did they get it? They didn't go to school for it. Nobody like told them like that they were the thing. So I really got into the idea that the hero could be like an unknown person. I really got into that. That this is not an unfamiliar theme. Like Jesus came from Nazareth, and they were worried about nothing good can come from Nazareth or something like that. So it's not like an unheard of thought, but I really Joseph Campbell brought it home that said like a modern person can be like a really important person in the silences of their personal despair. Each one of us carries the bright cross of the Redeemer, not in the bright moments of his tribe's great victories, but in the silences of his personal despair. So I had a lot of personal despair, and somehow Joseph Campbell was like a huge antidote to that. He made me realize my personal despair could be connected somehow to the ills of the whole society, and somehow that made things meaningful to me. Some dark thing that I was going through might be connected to some dark thing the whole world was going through. Shortly after that, I stopped wanting to be a normal person. There was some kundalini, serpent coming up from in the inside of my spine. It was like a magical. It was an overwhelming something that was definitely in the realm of religious experiences, transpersonal. It sort of like showed up, and a sequence of events happened over the next like 5 months, where I kind of lost I sort of went through. There's different names for it, different ways of describing it, but I sort of killed myself. I killed my existing identity under the thought that some new identity would, that there might be like a better identity. I went through a kind of mental, I think I'm going to need to take more time to explain it, but in this video, I guess I just want to get to the actual mystical experience. I think it was in May, or honestly, I forget what month it was in. But this adventure of sort of like going through an personal death, like an ego death, like I was just ruining my conception of myself and just abandoning it, and like in the idea that some greater thing was out there. I was put into a mental hospital for a couple weeks because I had decided to go to London. I wanted to get away, and so I just bought a plane ticket, but my parents, they had me agree to go to see, it put me in front of a psychiatrist. I guess I didn't think I was crazy, but they decided that I was. But they didn't keep me in the hospital they only kept me for 2 weeks, because that's how long they keep you in the hospital nowadays. They don't really. Many decades ago, they would keep you there a long time. But they let me out, and I still wanted to get away, but for some reason they were okay with the way I did it the next time, which was I wanted to go out to Colorado to see my friend. But really I just wanted to get away from my home, where I came from. And it was when I was away that I had my mystical experience, so it was a good idea. I arrived in Colorado, and I was hanging out with my friend, and I was in a state of high agitation. And he had experimented with psychedelics, and he had gotten some pot, and he boiled it into butter, and he cooked some cookies with that butter. And he gave me a cookie, and he didn't tell me. And this cookie triggered my, this event. So psychologically, leading up to this, I had started thinking like everything is kind of the same, like as if everything follows the same patterns. And I kept seeing the same patterns over and over again, and I was making sort of a sequence in my head of how everything conforms to the same sort of logos, or like logical schema. And I was able to sort of map everything into the one schema, which is hard to describe because mystical schemas are not easy to describe. But I think someday I might try to describe it. But it had something to do with like particles, and like love and fear, and how particles are, it's like by definition is sort of like love is that which attracts and fear is that which repels. So I was drawing some kind of parallel between the core emotions of love and fear, or pain and love, and like particle physics, like electromagnetic physics. I think under the influence of the drug, I started to see how there was a circularity to the connections I was making. Like there was like stages, and one stage would lead to the next stage, which would lead to the next stage, which would lead to the next stage. And as long as I was inside the stages and seeing it as sort of a journey, it felt kind of like a thought process, a worthy thought process. But eventually, I started to see that the stages were all circular, that like the stages led to each other. And if stages lead to each other, then you get a circle. And if you have a circle, it's as if the whole thing is one thing. So all the stages of events that I kept going through, I realized that they all were the same thing. And in mystical experiences, there's something called the oneness. They use the term oneness a lot. Everything is one. And this is essentially where I arrived, having thought through the stages and kept coming back to the same thing over and over again. So visually, my mystical experience was not that rich and interesting. Like some people will have visionary experiences, like in the book of Ezekiel. He has all sorts of visions, but or the book of Revelation. But my vision was utterly minimalistic. When I discovered the circularity of everything I was thinking, I actually had a slightly out-of-body experience. Mine only lasted a couple seconds, where I started to see myself objectively, like who I really was, apart from like the myopic logic that I was confined to when I was thinking about the stages individually. But then when I was thinking about the stages as a circle, as an eternal recurrence, I got outside of my body. I was able to see that I just was able to see myself as like a complete person, or as like a person out there. And then everything disappeared, basically. I ended up in like a gray space, a gray void. I guess the process by which everything disappeared was connected to the circle. It was like if everything is all the same, then it all neutralizes itself. Like all the opposites meld back into each other, and you return to some kind of like primordial place where everything is neutralized. And it was manifested as like a gray void. But now, so in addition, in the gray void, there was a circle. I was in a gray void, and then there was a circle. This is mysterious. Why would a circle appear if everything's been neutralized? And only in the psychology of Carl Jung can you find like a really adequate answer to that question. And he talks about how circles just appear in situations like that. He talks about how people have situations like that, and how circles just tend to appear. He calls them mandalas, and there's a whole many variations on the theme. But almost like exactly what you'd expect when somebody's having a peak experience, a circle appeared in my case too. And the circle came closer to me, and psychologically I started reverting to the status of a baby. I curled into like a fetal position, and I passed through the circle. And I remember crying, like it's as if my manly voice had turned into the voice of like a little kid. It changed tone, and it turned into a kid's voice. And I was crying, and it definitely, in retrospect, it was as if I had been born again through the passageway of that circle. The moment I went through the circle, I was bathed in a white light. Just nothing but a white light. And I was crying really intensely. And that's it. That's my whole vision, because the white light eventually dimmed down, and I started seeing things again. I started seeing the world again, but it was in the negative context of the white light, or the negative space. It's sort of like everything was in the white light. It just was dimmed down a little bit. So I've been in that. That's what I've been in for 20 years. I've been in that white light for 20 years, psychologically. And I'm still trying to integrate it. I'm still trying to do something with it. Achieve like a goal. Sorry. I came down from my intensity, and I was in kind of an intolerant, like my friend couldn't really put up with me very well, so I went and stayed in a hostel, and for the next week or so, like they kicked you out, at 11 a.m. so they could clean it. But like I slept up until the moment they kicked you out, and then I was so tired. I was just completely exhausted. But in a way, I was returning to sort of like, a more mundane way of doing and thinking about the world at that point. And I returned to a mundane thing, but I became a mystic. I became like an abstract person, somebody who isn't isn't completely here, and who he doesn't get attached to things very easily, to worldly affairs. Like, who am I in the context of social roles? I lost my my sense of myself as like a concrete person who's here in society conforming in a way. I have no ability to conform, and I have a desire to conform because my life is not easy. It's been pretty hard, but I don't necessarily have the ability to conform, and I really don't understand it completely. There's like a bunch of asteroids in the asteroid belt, and sometimes I identify with the asteroids. It's as if my experience shattered me into many different pieces, which kind of float with relatively little unity about them. So anyway, that was event 3. The white light was event 3. That's the best I can do for now. Next week, maybe I'll tell you about that. Yeah.